So this is really cool. Matt, our sound guy, the whole team. First of all, give our entire team an applause back there. It does not work without them. So, and so he now believes that this is a thumb. So he's been working with me great. I give him this, and he does. Yeah, exactly. He gives it back. So, which I do this, and then he gets mad. So, but I'm so glad you all stayed. This is the final part of the night, obviously, before we go down and have the party. But this is where we just kind of get to talk frank with y'all. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go into the app and ask your questions. Now, there'll be some questions that we'll have to go, well, you know, we can't, we'll answer as best we can, right? So, but what I want to do first is I want to kind of go around and introduce you to who's sitting up here, and what do they do, and why do they even have a right to be up here, right? So, you know, what gives us credibility? So I'm going to start over here with James, since he's got his mouth full of soda, so.
Hi. Hey, everybody. My name's James Beswick, and I run the developer advocate team for Serverless at AWS.
I'll go a little bit longer. Sorry. My name is Rita Sethi. I'm a senior solution architect working with financial services customers. What gives me the right to be here? So I started implementing event-driven architectures when they were not called event-driven architectures about 20 years ago. I've implemented EDAs with financial services, with telecom, with pharmaceuticals, and retail. And I've seen the technology evolve over the last 20 years.
All right, thank you. Let's go here. I'll come back last. So you go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I'm Michael. I'm a product manager for EventBridge. And my focus areas there are on API destinations, open source integrations, tools, cloud events, these kind of things. Luca?
Hi, everyone. My name is Luca. I'm a serverless specialist. I'm based in London. And before joining AWS, I was working in a company called The Zone that is live sports streaming. Maybe some of you have heard about that. And there I was vice president of architecture, so serverless was basically more than half of our architecture.
Hi everyone, my name is Sheen Brisals. I don't work for AWS. I work for an enterprise. I've been kind of in the serverless space from 2017, and also a serverless hero, co-authored a book recently, and I kind of speak and write about serverless event-driven architecture on AWS. Yeah, that's me.
All right, excellent. And my name is Eric Johnson, and I am a principal developer advocate for serverless. I've been doing serverless pretty much since the day it came out. I've been doing EDA. We were talking earlier with Sarah, actually, where I was born into serverless. I was born into EDA. I hadn't really done a lot before that, and so it's interesting. That's the way I think. I only think EDA. So does that give me credibility? Probably not, but here I am. Now, I will tell you that Sheen actually asked me, said, why am I the only one not AWS? I said, because it took the rest of us to go up against him. So he's that smart. So no, in all honesty, we wanted to get, obviously, a voice that wasn't just AWS, but we wanted to give you some different opinions. And what I'm going to do is I have a couple of questions that I'm already going to ask them, and then I need to step off for a second because we have a technical difficulty with our app here. But I'm going to ask a question, and then I'd like you all to kind of go around and see it, and then we'll go here. So this is we'll do a low and easy one first. So here we go. So James, I'll start with you, and then just come around. What cool things are people building with EDA today? What are you seeing?
Well, there's more a question of what people aren't building, because a lot of the times EDA fits into a broad range of different solutions, different industries, and many people find they accidentally fall into it, whereas others design specifically with that in mind. But obviously, you know, when you look across working across different systems and distributed systems with different latency requirements, it is going to work in places where you've got very low latency, like a fulfillment center where you have robots or something like that. But where you've got different systems that are much more common in enterprises, where you're working across SaaS providers, different microservices, different things that you've built, different legacy systems, this is really where it comes into play. I think where it's become most useful, and really why it's become most famous, is where you look in enterprises with lots of legacy systems where lift and shift has failed because it's just too hard to do. EDA gives you this ability to extend your platform and to build new functionality and do things much more quickly. So I've seen a lot of people find that is really the superpower. You can suddenly connect these old systems to something new using EDA. But then I've also seen lots of enterprises that are startups start this way as well. So this is not a brand new pattern. It's something that's fairly old and is coming back. But I'm seeing it come back with a resurgence just because of the business value that it can provide.
I'll talk about financial services. So mainframes don't sound cool, but JP Morgan, they had this mainframe system which they had for 30 years, and people are really scared to touch mainframes. And it was a payment system, and the payment methods are evolving every single day, right? You've got Klarna, PayPal, and whatnot. So they moved this application onto a event-driven architecture on AWS. They're doing 5,000 transactions per second. They're processing over $1 trillion transactions through that EDA system. I thought that was brilliant thing to do, because all the organizations I talk to are so scared of touching mainframes.
Yeah, so as a PM for EventBridge, I'm obviously biased. But what really amazes me, what our customers tell us, how they use EventBridge, is similar to what James Orquart once wrote in his book about flow architectures, where he was painting a vision of the worldwide flow, not the World Wide Web, where you could literally go anywhere and tap into a stream of events. And we see that with EventBridge because we have partner integrations. You can send your own events to EventBridge. So we have this ingest of different types of events, whether it's from third-party APIs or your own apps or AWS applications. And then we have routing logic that goes outside to external APIs again, to your own applications, to AWS services. And so it's this mesh, this connectivity, and this flow that customers use EventBridge and build event-driven architectures for. And again, it's not just about EventBridge. I just happen to know the service very well that I can talk about it. And so what really amazes me is all the different architectures across the AWS boundaries that customers use and build EDAs for.
So as serverless specialist, I have the privilege to speak with a lot of customers in EMEA, and I think I have followed from retailers to finance to any other type of industry out there, and there are some common patterns that I have seen using EDAs. As you were saying, well, latency is not, let's say, the first big deal. Obviously, there are certain workloads that require a certain level of latency and SLAs around that. But if you think about that, very often it's not the case. And therefore, in that case, using, let's say, a quick acknowledgement towards the client, and then doing everything in EDA and having a system that is eventually consistent, we allow you to scale very nicely. The other thing that recently I was talking with a customer where he had some integration with Salesforce. And these guys here, they did an amazing job with EventBridge, and then having the possibility to integrate natively with Salesforce, that I think is fantastic. I work, just a bit of context, I worked for 6 years integrating with Salesforce. And Salesforce is not the easiest way, especially when you have like spike of traffic, like I had, because we were moving from 10,000 users to 2 million in 1 minute. Imagine when you have like the Champions League final that is kicking off and you have exclusive rights in certain countries. And therefore, the direct connection is not the most friendly thing that you can have. And instead, having at the edge of your architecture a lot of eventual consistency and event-driven architecture is the perfect way for integrating with your system, with your core domain. Usually, you were mentioning about lift and shift failing and moving to EDA. For me, you know, everything that is on the edge of your architecture, everything that is a generic or supporting domain in DDD style is a good candidate for looking into EDA.
So Eric's question was, what are the cool things people are building, right? Could be hard things as well, right? Of course. So let me give a different perspective. So when I started looking into serverless back in 2017, 2018, there was always something was missing in the AWS service stack. Now, so with that, we use SQS, SNS, etc. to push something to production. Mid-2019, it was a big e-commerce platform that went live, everything back into serverless. The following day, EventBridge was announced and released. And that's exactly what was missing when, when we were going through the journey. With EventBridge, what it brings is it really helps you to decouple the concerns or areas. And now we have a service where you can look at domain-driven design and come down all the way to your bounded context and set up autonomous teams to produce services that live in isolation, separate account, whatever the way you kind of build. And then there is a seamless communication, event-driven communication happens between the different bounded contexts and the services that they live inside those boundaries. So that is one of the coolest things that happened in this space, and then really kind of enabled the expansion of teams setup along with team topologies. Is a great concept to bring in to put in the structure or order the way the team's been organized in a big enterprise. That for me has been a great strength of how the event-driven architecture evolved, and with the necessary and sufficient services and the tooling behind, how it helps teams to kind of expand and then build more things, more cool or hard things.
Okay. So we're gonna do things a little old school here because the app doesn't seem to be linked to me. So Ben, would you do me a favor? Matt, can we give Ben a microphone? And we're just going to do this old school. And so if you want to be thinking of questions, I'm going to ask him another question here while we're doing it. But if you've got a question, get Ben's attention, and we'll do our best to answer it. The other one, I think the other one, I'm going to start actually, we'll start with you actually and kind of go around here. What, you ready? Okay. What are the, you're not, I promise you. Yeah. What are some of the gotchas, or what when you're using EDA, where do people trip up a little bit?
That's a good question. That's
I
usually how it
know.
starts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You're welcome.
I would say watch Dave's keynote in the beginning. I could go with technical things. I could go with organizational topics, politics, skill sets.
Yeah.
So let me go with the technical things because they are in my control from an EventBridge side. Because of event-driven architectures being eventually consistent, meaning the information propagates asynchronously through these systems, I think the biggest problem that we haven't really nailed yet is observability, like visualizing what is going on in these highly asynchronous and distributed flows. And this is why I think looking at step functions, one of our sister services, is where they got the user experience really right in terms of visualizing the state or the business logic that is executed, and then also being able to redrive on failures. And I think in event-driven architectures, because they are not so central in terms of an orchestrator, but more decentralized, it's a little bit harder to get right and adopt that model. But I think overall, this is the biggest challenge right now that customers, from a technical perspective, will have to overcome. And we don't really have a good answer yet in this space.
So on my side, you covered observability. I had in mind that as well. But I think the real challenge often is understanding where the boundaries lies. Because the problem is, if you think about that, we have a bazillion of tutorials on how to write a microservice. We have great documentation for connecting to EventBridge, to Kafka, to whatever. But the reality is there aren't many heuristics on how to design a boundary. And I think David mentioned this morning about event storming. That is definitely a good tool to have in order to identify the boundaries collectively. But in general, this is for me one of the challenges, not only in EDA, but in general in distributed systems, because that is often overlooked. We think that we know the answer, but the reality is that you need to take into account multiple dimensions, right? So you need to think about the organization structure, you need to think about the cognitive load for the team, you need to think about the maturity of the team, and how much is automated inside the organization, how much is provided by the platform team. So there are a lot of dimensions that you take into account when you are designing these things, and also how, let's say, important is the domain that is assigned to a team, how fast the feedback loop should be. So there are a lot of consideration over there that often are not well thought through, because we are lacking of the connection between the tech part, the cultural aspect, and the organization structure part. And these three dimensions for me is something that I always say are tightly coupled. In the moment you touch one, you're going to impact the other two, for better or worse. So thinking multidimensionally, I think, is an important thing. And if I can add a second one, is probably investing time in designing events. Because often we have these, let's say, and I was writing down a few notes in the last few months around how often I heard companies decentralizing the architecture function. That I am absolutely up for that. But the challenge often is that we are treating architecture like we were treating coding. Like we rush towards writing the code, and we're not understanding the full picture. And that will bite us in the long run, because the reality is at some point you will have that feature that is spun across multiple domains. And if you don't have, let's say, people that start to think holistically how the system works and take a step back and realize, yes, we are doing the right thing, or we need to, let's say, deal with these things in different way, it might be a challenge. And therefore, working on the contracts and the communication across boundaries is, for me, let's say, a good time investment, because it will save you from a lot of, let's say, difficult moments during the journey of when you need to accelerate and deploy a feature quickly, or when you are, let's say, thinking about a massive new feature that spans across the system.
So let me give a different perspective from an organizational as well as from architectural point of view. So for years, engineers, as we've been kind of used to building APIs. So the synchronous nature of thinking is always with us, even though event-driven services is always there. S3 to Lambda to SQS to et cetera, is always there. But bringing in that kind of clarity in an engineering mind, separating sync versus async, is harder than you think. And this is where often engineers spend a lot of time and often get it wrong as well. Especially, say, within a bounded context, we tend to hear microservices like products or customers, payments, etc. No, there are so many other microservices live within the bounded context. Like, you have admin services, or you have sort of auth services, so on and so forth. And when we architect such solutions, differentiating, okay, so this is something async that can live on its own as a separate service, that clarity takes time for engineers to understand. So when I sit with engineers, especially those who are new to serverless or learning serverless, this is an area that I focus a lot. Trying to make them think, okay, why do we separate this sync API side of things from async? Because that thinking we need to bring in as part of the practice. With experience it comes in, but that's I see as one of the challenges in the industry, where things get muddled up and they build the wrong thing, and the boundaries get crossed, and all over the mess happens. So that's, to me, one of the big issues with EDA, and that the teams that needs to put that practice to make engineers understand, to clearly separate out.
Okay. So we're going to change up a little bit so we can get to, I now have access to the questions. So, and I can ask more questions, because I have some questions for you all, but we'll take that offline. But yeah, so I want to ask the questions that you're asking, and one, Rita, I'm going to ask you this one, and we're going to get harder questions as well, but I'm curious, what are the most interesting use of AWS services that you have seen in the wild?
I have to mention generative AI, right?
Oh yeah, you don't have to. If it's interesting to you, I'm not interested. But no, I am. I'm just kidding. So yeah.
So we've recently been working with one of my customers for an intelligent document processing use case. So they get lots of documents from their brokers. So it's an insurance customer. They get lots of documents, which is a request for quote. And at the moment, they manually extract data from there and put it into the policy admin system to get a code. So we were experimenting with Textract, which is our sort of text extraction service, to get data out of these documents and put it into the policy admin system. But LLMs came along, and there are certain use cases where OCR technologies don't do very well, like a simple use case, like the OCR are not very good at distinguishing between zeros and O's. So that's where we used Bedrock, and it worked really, really well. So I thought that was a very good use case where we could see LLMs sort of complementing the existing services. Textract with Bedrock was a great use case. And at the moment, it's still in POC stage, but I think this is generative AI plus event-driven architecture, sort of a brilliant use case for that, because when an email comes along, it will generate an event saying, hey, there is an email out there, something picks it up, puts it in the policy admin system. Once that goes generated, send it back to the brokers. So, yeah, very interesting use case.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, James, I'm going to ask you a question here. With the complex UI, okay, what do you think works best? The UI integrates with many different microservices, mixed sync and async with events, or a single backend for front-end gateway that orchestrates into the rest? Now, I'm coming to him with, don't you worry, I've got a more Luca-ish question coming. So, and you can chime in if you want, if James is wrong. So,
No, I leave to James.
It depends.
there it is.
Thank you. I'm done here. No, I mean, in reality, you can make arguments for many of these things, but very few of us are building greenfield solutions where you get to choose. You're walking into a situation where often you're having to build with things that already exist and putting the best combination of solutions together. In all of these things, my best advice is to consider what problem you're solving, consider the resources you have and how you can get there as quickly as possible. And whatever gets you there, to me, is likely the right answer. But obviously, in a greenfield environment, I'd love to take a very pure architecture that's very clean, and it looks like one of these examples we pick up and use that all day long. But I just don't know if it's that realistic for many of our customers.
All right. Luca approves. All right, all right. Okay, so Luca, okay, we've talked a lot about back-end EDA and monolith migrations today. What's the right approach or pattern for moving to micro-front-ends from a full, fat front-end app? I think fat should have been in there, but whatever.
Nice. Okay, so when you want to migrate towards micro-front-end, the easiest path, if it exists this word, easiest path is impossible in migration, but so usually is when you start to think about how you want to slice your application. The first, back in the days, what I created is what I call the decision framework that basically span across 4 dimensions. Is like identifying micro-front-ends, how you route, how you communicate, and how you compose them. So the first few decisions, those are usually the decisions that everyone has to pass through when you are building a micro-front-ends application. So when you select it, for instance, let's put some names here. So we want to do a vertical split where you have like just a vertical approach of your micro-front-end. Therefore, it could be one page or a group of pages that are available there. And you do client-side rendering. Usually, you take one of those pages and you start to go end-to-end. Like you would do strangler pattern in the microservices world. And this approach helps a lot because it's, first of all, you create muscles inside the teams. So you start to have like the team that start to create one solution end to end. And then the only thing that you need to, that remains to do is just how to route from the old monolith to the new micro-front-end. And that usually is a smart way to do that is intercepting the request on the edge. So you can use, for instance, in AWS, Lambda the edge, CloudFront function, and there you can just map saying, okay, so everything that is /catalog goes into the micro-front-end world, everything else is going to the old world. And why this is extremely powerful? Well, first of all, because you don't have to pollute the code of your micro-front-ends or the old world on the monolith. But secondly, because you can, in the case that there is an issue on the new world, you can literally change one thing that is happening outside the code, and basically they intercepting the requests that could be inside the key value store that we recently announced into CloudFront, or it could be a Lambda the edge that you are reading a configuration or whatever. And that's the only change that you do, and say, okay, so now everything that was in catalog, it doesn't go anymore into the new world because there are bugs. We move back to the new world, and that is basically seconds. And also the risk that they rollback or deployment of other things. But usually if you start to work in this vertical approach that you divide and slice piece by piece, then it's easier also to sell internally. Because if you think about that, in the past, when we had like massive applications, we need to ask, I don't know, 18 months or 24 months in stealth mode, writing code, and then suddenly big bang deployment, and nothing works. In reality, in this way, you create this high iterative approach and mindset that will enable developers to, let's say, deploy more often and create a wealth, a company and culture inside your organization.
All right, excellent. Sheen, this one's for you, because you've done this effectively, as far as I know.
All right.
All right.
See the question first.
Yeah, we'll see what comes out, right? All right. When it comes to upskilling across the company, what techniques can be applied in a deliberate way that brings people along and doesn't feel too top-down?
That's a difficult question because one answer doesn't fit to everyone.
Okay. What worked for you?
So there are two sides to upskilling. One is like providing the opportunity. So for example, at an enterprise level, you can provide a learning platform for everyone to, learn from. That has its benefits and also has its drawbacks, because from my past experience, I know that initial interest is high, then it slowly comes down and no one really kind of bother. The thing that I find effective is on-the-job learning. So when an engineer or a team or a department, involves in building something new, that's an opportunity to bring in more focused learning. So that has a purpose, so that with the purpose, the engineers kind of buy in and then dedicate and do the learning and take it forward. So in the second approach, what some of the enterprises and teams do is they have this sort of bootstrapping initiative. So for example, every month or every few weeks, they run the bootstraps for a few days or a week, where all new joiners can take part and then, and get that trained and come out, good to implement things, etc. So that's very common in the industry. And along with that, you also find the center of excellence setup, as in AWS or cloud or serverless. That has the power to kind of radiate outward towards different teams. So the center of excellence kind of becomes an enabling team in team topology sense, so that others benefit from what they kind of promote or provide for other teams to learn. So this is the kind of ways I see, because otherwise, just like a mass upskilling over the entire enterprise, I don't think that brings the real benefits. It may kind of sounds nice, but in terms of real benefits, you need to kind of break it down and take it through different silos or departments or divisions, and maybe more focused.
All right. Okay. So Rita, this question's for you, as we're going to get a little more technical here. What is the ideal storage for failed events that should be retired or investigated later?
I'm sure others can also add to this, but I think like queues, SQS would give you dead letter queues, so for you to for your events. But I don't know if anybody taking events out from there and then putting elsewhere. So I've always seen your failed events, you put in dead letter queues, and then you take them out and investigate them and redirect them into your queue to process them again. But is there a storage where have you seen use cases where people take them out? And
DLQ is the most common one that I've seen as well. also because it's heavily integrated in every serverless service. So in that case, it's like literally configuration. So unless there are edge cases that has to be handled, it's that DLQ, so SQS basically is the easiest one.
So this is a very specific one. Michael, I think I'm going to give it to you if you're ready. And you can say, well, hey, you know, when it comes to Salesforce, okay, the integration, you familiar?
I heard about it.
Okay, good, all right. The action, and there are some we may go, hey, let's take this offline. So, but when it comes to Salesforce, the actual CDC native integration with EventBridge, there's the standard is different due to the way Salesforce pushes data changes, mainly database CDC driven down. What solution do you suggest? Placing an ACL or pushing specific events from Salesforce, the open host model, without relying on native ways? Is that something you would be aware of?
Well, we do have the native integration with the partner event source. This sounds like it's the source integration, not the target integration, speaking of CDC. And it sounds like the existing partner integration is not usable for the person who posted this question because it's about CDC and other. So I would love to follow up with the person, if the person is still here. Are we having questions from you? Perfect, yeah.
All right, yeah,
Find me after. Thank you.
Pull up offline. I'm trying to be real here. So, very cool. All righty. All right, so I'm going to ask him and throw one out here. We're short on time here, but I think this is an interesting question because one of the things we always talk about is the right tools for the right job, right? And that's one of the things we want to be real clear with. So the question we have here on EDA, it said, what are some applications that you feel like EDA would not be right for? Okay, meaning what is the workload that maybe EDA, I'm just repeating myself now, would not be right for, that it may make more sense to use another architecture for EDA, which is event-driven architectures. Sorry.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. I'm helping. So anybody want to go first? Okay. Yeah?
I think if your application is completely within your control and it's small and you know doesn't have to evolve, it's not a strategic application, then yes, don't do EDA. But I'm yet to come with large-scale applications which you don't have to do events. So to answer the question, small applications are not strategic and completely within your control.
I think I'm going to chime in on this one, if everybody's all right with that. I think the other thing about that is, I don't know if I would ever say there's an entire application that just doesn't apply to EDA. I would say parts of the application don't. And the parts that I think don't are when they're super latency sensitive and they need to be synchronous, right? Because EDA, just by its very nature, I taught this to Dave for the keynote, is by its very nature is asynchronous for the most part, right? And so if you need an instant response, not an acknowledgement, but an instant response with the answer, gaming systems, things like that, EDA doesn't make sense for that part. But what we find is a lot of after-the-fact processing that happens. Hey, let's correlate some statistics. Let's email all your moms, whatever. I don't know. But it can be done after the fact asynchronously, and this is where EDA makes a lot of sense. So I'd be hard-pressed to say there's an application out there where the whole thing should not be EDA. But I would be, I'm good to say, yeah, there's some different parts. And if you're going to argue with me.
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing. I'm giving a specific use case where everything comes in place and serves the purpose. So take, for example, personalization. So most retailers run recommendations, product recommendations, bunch of algorithms, crunching the data in the back. So that's probably not a serverless specific task. So you need containers constantly kind of munching gigabytes of more data, applying lots of scientific algorithms and doing things. So that's probably not event-driven side of things. However, the output of that data comes out, possibly goes to a bucket. From there, it could be an event-driven situation that it triggers a Lambda function or downstream services to take the data and store it or push it to certain serve layers like, I don't know, Redis cache or a DynamoDB to be served by the consumer via an API in a synchronous way. So here you have everything from start to finish. So this is exactly what Eric was echoing, that you can't simply isolate one part. There may be cases, but if you're thinking of sort of enterprise scale applications, you would have every bit of this architecture in place, event-driven, synchronous, asynchronous, containers, serverless, etc.
All right, excellent. James, I'm going to throw a question to you. Yeah, you thought you were out. All right. So I think this is pretty, from a technical standpoint, sensitive data going across a company-wide EventBridge bus. What do you think?
So for sensitive data, you want to restrict where you're keeping it, where you're transmitting it to. So generally speaking, as a rule, I wouldn't package up a credit card number or a social security number of that nature, put it in an event and just fire it out. And why is that? Because generally speaking, events are designed to be consumed by a broad audience or people or consumers you don't know. You don't know how they're going to be handling that data. And yet you can lock down events, but generally speaking, as a rule, you're thinking about the way they're consumed. And also, you have a good alternative. You can essentially pass along a token that enables a lookup by whoever receives the event is authorized to look up that data. So although I know often it's the fastest way to put things together, to just put things in an event and push it off, and a credit card number might be a bit of an excessive example. There are many other examples where the data you're pushing, you might not want everybody who consumes the events to have access to. So it's worth considering this balance of, do they just have access to the data, or do they need to do an additional lookup to prove that they have the right to access that data?
All right. So I'm going to do one more question, and then we have a couple of final statements, and then, but this question is going to go to Sheen. We're just beating you up here. There's lots of questions. But this was a specific question to you. Do you have any advice for someone thinking about writing a book?
You're repeating the question. What's the question?
Do you have? It's hard to hear each other up here. It really is, because all the there. Do you have any advice for somebody writing a book?
Yes, just write it. Yeah, honestly, if you read any of the books about writing, the first thing they say is just write it. Now, I mean, jokes apart, there are different ways that you can bring out the work. Self-publishing has become so much easier. There is a book, actually, I was reading a couple of months ago, how to do self-publishing on, Kindle store, etc. So that has become so easier. Or there are ways you can approach the established publishers, how to submit the proposal and, go through the process, etc. It's just a matter of finding time and writing the content. And it'll be useful if anyone, if you have an idea, start writing. Don't wait for an opportunity to happen or a publisher to come along. Start writing. Keep adding the content when, the time you have. And so that means when an opportunity comes or when you start kind of, pushing forward, you already have that sort of, content available for you to take forward. So for me personally, it really helped because I've been kind of blogging back in those days with the serverless experience. So while we were writing many chapters, I kind of, was able to kind of take those kind of contents and then, take it forward. So don't hold it, just write.
Just write. All right. Don't worry, be happy. Love it. Well, that concludes our time for the panel. I hope you got questions answered. I hope that, and if you have more, corner one of us. We have to stay till you leave, so take advantage of it. In all honesty, we want to say thank you very, very much for joining us here at EDA Day. We love doing this. We love talking with you. We love hearing from you. And so thank you so much. We're getting ready to go downstairs, and we've got some snacks out and some different things. But one announcement I'm going to tell you before you leave, if you're interested in this, and I hope you are, is we will be doing another EDA Day, not here in London. It will actually be in Poland in September. So watch for dates, watch for that, and please help us push out The other thing is, please give us feedback. Every time we do this, we're trying to make it better and better. So please take time to do individual feedback on the talks, help our speakers. And with that, I want to say thank you very much from our whole team. Have a great night. We'll see you downstairs.